afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the Transportation Committee meeting of October 19th, 2020. I am Councilman Mike Bonin, the chair of this committee. I am joined today by my colleagues, Mr. Paul Koretz of the 5th District and Mr. Joe Buscaino of the 15th District. We have also have a special meeting at 1:15 that we will roll into this meeting once we get past 1:15. For those who are going to be calling in with public comment on any of the items, either on the regular or special agenda, let me give you the call-in instructions. Members of the public who would like to offer public comment should call 669-254-5252 and use meeting ID number 161-750-5079, and then press pound and pound again when prompted for the participant ID. Once you are admitted into the meeting, press *9 to request to speak. I'm going to repeat that. Call 669-254-5252, and the meeting ID is 161-750-5079, followed by pound and then pound again when prompted for participant ID. Once admitted into the meeting, press *9 to request to speak. With that, we will go to item number 1.
Item number 1 in the agenda is the general manager from LADOT to present a verbal report relative to ongoing projects and programs and recognition of department employees for outstanding service.
Great. Is Ms. Reynolds here?
Yes, I am. Can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Great. All right. So today we have our monthly recognition for LADOT employees who are doing outstanding work, and we have 2 that we are recognizing today. The first one I'm going to recognize is Salvador Robles, who is the lead crossing guard in the Hollywood Crossing Guard office. Mr. Robles was hired as a crossing guard on April 16, 2016, and on April 30th, 2018, he was offered the opportunity to perform the duties of a lead guard for the Hollywood Crossing Guard office. In March 2020, Mayor Eric Garcetti declared a local health emergency and activated the Disaster Service Worker Program. Due to COVID-19, schools are closed, and crossing guards have been reassigned to carry out emergency responsibilities as service workers. Mr. Robles is currently assigned to the Lex City Center Hotel and has been described as an outstanding worker by his site supervisor. From the day he first reported, he's gone out of his way to be helpful and work with the clients they serve. There is no job too hard for him. He's demonstrated superior work ethic and has a kind personality. During times like these, it is employees like Mr. Robles that truly stand out. His willingness and desire to serve in any capacity has not gone unnoticed. Keep up the great work, Mr. Robles, and thank you for your service. Next, I'm going to recognize Michiko Murakami. She is a management analyst with External Affairs. Michiko has only been with LADOT for a little over a year, but in that time, she has become the glue of the LADOT External Affairs Division. Michiko is a management analyst, but her training as a sculpture artist shines through in her ability to creatively problem solve and piece complicated projects together. Michiko played an essential role to author and launch LADOT's new Racial Equity Action Plan and Racial Equity Core Team. She led contracting support for LADOT's critical COVID-19 response programs, including Slow Streets and LA Alfresco, and she's helped bring LADOT's community engagement into the 21st century by creating a system to translate public materials into 11 different languages upon request. Chico has been at the center of some of LADOT's most important work in this time of crisis, and we couldn't do any of this without her. She's able to navigate complex systems that improve the quality of life for Angelinos, and her can-do attitude and optimism makes her a breath of fresh air for the whole team. Thank you, Michiko, for all of your hard work. And that concludes our employee recognition for this meeting. Councilmember, you're muted.
Thank you. Mr. Koretz or Mr. Buscaino, do you have any questions or comments? Yes, Mr. Koretz.
Yeah, I have one question. I know we're doing a recall of some of the signals in the city. I just wanted to flag one that I think is the most problematic in my district, which is Crescent Heights and Olympic. It's a slightly blind turn, and we have a lot of people that seem to be running across rather than waiting and pushing the light. We also have some Shabbat timing issues as well. So we have a lot of the Orthodox community running across the signals because they can't cross them. So if I could flag that for you and ask your staff to follow up with Jay Greenstein in my office about it, that would be great.
Thank you for letting us know. We'll follow up.
Thank you.
Mr. Buscaino, any questions?
Nope, I'm good. Congratulations and thank you to DOT employees. I love my crossing guard. I'll tell you that. I miss seeing them out there.
So I did have a question about crossing guards, we have 6 minutes until 1:15 when we can do public comment on both meetings together, so feel free to answer in detail. My question on crossing guards is this. I'm thrilled that they have been redeployed, and I'm very, very grateful for them. There is talk about LAUSD and other area schools coming back as a result of waivers that they can apply for, most likely K through 2 or something like that in the first round. Have we had any conversations with LAUSD about what sort of heads up we might get about that so that we will have time to deploy our traffic officers properly?
So I appreciate the question, and we'll certainly pass it along to the Parking Enforcement Traffic Control lead for the Crossing Guard program. To my knowledge, we have not received any communication or information from LA Unified about when, how much extra time they expect to give to us prior to needing the crossing guards to come back. The challenge for us is that the crossing guards are mostly, we have kept them employed and are paying their salary while they're on administrative leave because we did not want to lose that cohort of folks. We can't deploy all of them as disaster service workers because many of them are older adults or they have underlying health conditions. And so we fought hard to make sure that we could keep them because of this concern that if and when LA Unified decides to come back, it will likely be somewhat chaotic, and the process is not really clear to us as to sort of how people will be notified if we are going to find out any other way other than just hearing about it through the grapevine. And so we've been trying to figure out how are we going to redeploy when we won't have a full. Some of them will be on longer term disaster service worker assignments. They're working at hotels or they're working as contact tracers, and so we'll have to juggle a bit and probably have to reprioritize as the schools open which corners qualify for guards based on the number that we have available to deploy at the time.
How much time do you think the department would need to stand up crossing guards at, a couple dozen schools if LAUSD announced they were opening a couple dozen? Or does it really depend on where they are?
It sort of depends on where they are, but ideally we'd have at least a week's notice. It would be nice to have more, like a couple weeks, but if we had at least a week, then we could make sure that we, contacted everybody, got them all, let them know when and where they needed to deploy, and then, examine whether or not some of them need to be called back from disaster service worker assignments. That's the challenge that we'll face is the guards deploy based on the part of the city where they live, and they're matched up with the schools on that basis because it's such an odd split shift that it really doesn't make sense for folks unless they live nearby to the school. And so it's possible that we'll have some schools reopening, but the crossing guards that staff those corners are on extended disaster service worker assignments. And so that may take a little bit, we may need a little bit more time to actually figure out whether or not we can bring those folks back.
Thank you. I'll reach out to Superintendent Buettner and to Steve Zimmer, the school board member who represents my area, just to give them a heads up that they may want to be thinking about notifying us when schools are in the queue for applications, so that we'll be able to staff up properly and keep our kids safe.
Very much appreciated.
You are, thank you. So seeing nothing else on this, before we actually receive the item, we do need to take public comment on it. We need to wait one more minute before we can open up public comment for both meetings. So let me just ask the clerk, before we do so, or the CLA, I'm not sure which, on item number 7, there need to be some technical corrections. Could you state those at this time?
Yes, it's the CLA for item number B. They are both, hang on for just 1 minute. We have a couple, as you said, technical corrections. One is an expansion. I'm sorry. For item number B, we would recommend you approve the resolution as amended to revise the first moving clause in the resolution to include a reference to California Vehicle Code Section 22507. And then for item number 7C, we recommend you approve the resolution as amended to expand the Laurel Canyon segment from Victory Boulevard to Burbank Boulevard. So those are the two technical corrections.
Great, thank you for that. So at this time, we will open up public comment for this meeting, and it is now 1:15, so we will do a public comment for the special meeting as well. Mr. Bruins.
Good afternoon, members of the public. I will call on you individually. When I call on you, please state your name and which items you'd like to speak, and how much time you get depends on how many items you'd like to speak on. So for the first caller, at this time, if you would like to speak, please raise your hand by pressing *9. Okay, the first caller is an 818 number that ends in 1108. Please unmute yourself by pressing *6 and identify yourself.
Yeah, hi, it's Daniel Gus. All items plus general, please.
Okay, you have 3 minutes. You may begin.
Okay, great. Thank you. Council members, good afternoon. Item number 5, the Alfresco program. It's unclear, at least as far as I read, whether we're talking about expanding this to sidewalk dining or dining in the gutter where the parking, where parking spaces would otherwise be. Parking in the gutter of a street is not only dirty, it's dangerous, and it also hurts the businesses by taking away parking spaces. Similarly, I guess this is for your various items regarding the Alfresco program. Similarly, I have written multiple times in my column in recent weeks of homeless people lasting diarrhea, not only across the sidewalks, but also into the gutter. So you're proposing dining in areas that are putrid with human bodily waste. And so it's not that it's a bad idea, but you have to consider you're hurting the businesses by removing parking. You're putting people in a dangerous situation if you're talking about setting up seats in the gutter, like outside of Grand Central Market in downtown. And you have this problem of homeless people defecating across the sidewalk and into the gutter. I don't know how you deal with that. Moving on to the items regarding oversized vehicles and parking. I know somebody just mentioned the Van Nuys area, Burbank, and Victory. There is an exceedingly large number of these vehicles on Sepulveda Boulevard between Ventura and Victory. I hope that you will apply these same rules to that area, because even though it's Sepulveda, it is basically becoming a parking lot for enormous and broken down motorhomes. And I will move on to my general public comment. Council members, undoubtedly you heard that an MTA worker was murdered by a woman at the 7th Street and Metro stop over the weekend. it is of a surprise to nobody that this happened. Marie Martinez said she and her daughter will never ride the subway. I believe that was the red line also, because it's dangerous and filthy. For years, I have expressed concerns that there are children being exploited in the subways for panhandling purposes. I've provided photos of that. There are dancers and performers and vendors in the trains, and they get in your face for tips, as do the homeless people. And the only time I see law enforcement in the subway system is when they're scanning people's rider fare cards. There is no enforcement for security. There is no enforcement for safety, or the way that some of these people are harassing regular riders, and now somebody was murdered. That should be your top priority. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, the next caller is an 847 area code, last four digits 8847. Please unmute yourself and identify yourself.
Hi, my name is Tom Bellino. I would like to speak on general public comment items number 1 and 5, and I am a board member of the MacArthur Park Neighborhood Council.
Okay, you have 3 minutes. You may begin.
Okay, so like I said, I am a board member of the MacArthur Park Neighborhood Council, but I will be speaking as myself as a resident of the city. So I wanted to speak about the Slow Streets program. And just to start out, MacArthur Park has a lot of arterial streets and few quiet side streets that people can recreate or safely walk and bike on. So drivers then often speed down our very few side streets that have long blocks, so they can get up to pretty high speeds. And community groups in the area are very supportive of slow streets because of those reasons. You know, we want quiet streets to be able to walk and bike and just live peacefully on. And we do have some slow streets here that I will add are necessary to increase outdoor distance recreation and commuting during COVID and beyond. And they are necessary to achieve Vision Zero, which has been committed to by LADOT and the City Council. And, you know, I'm sure you've seen them. There's these little barricades that you can drive around that may or may not have a sign on them. And every time I've gone out to monitor the barricades, at least one person has thanked me or said, like, aren't these great, or something like that. So the community really likes it. However, many people still don't know about the program or what the barricades are. We need clear, durable signage in English and Spanish at the very least. The signs and barricades need to be permanent or at least not movable by the average person. And, you know, it's exhausting and dangerous for people to have to go out multiple times a day to fix these barricades. I go and monitor the barricades myself almost every day, and I've seen myself, the drivers often hit and knock over the barricades, sometimes on accident, sometimes on purpose, and residents have to pick them up. The public should not be tasked with constantly putting themselves at risk to maintain these signs and barricades. The easiest solution is to make the slow streets permanent and to install barricades and signs that do not need regular maintenance. Cities around the country and the world, including here in LA County, have figured out sustainable solutions, and we should adopt those as well. Regarding the LA Alfresco program, I wasn't planning on speaking on this, but the last caller moved me to do so. We should not have people dining on the sidewalks because the sidewalks are for walking and safely. We need room to safely walk and not pass within a few feet of people without masks who are eating. What we could do is what cities around the country and the world, including Santa Monica and Culver City, do, is put these dining areas in the street. These street areas can be cleaned. There will be no blasting of human excrement because there will be people around watching these spaces. Eyes on the street means that these spaces will be cleaner and safer, and that is a much better solution than what we see in areas like Los Feliz, where you can't even walk.
Thank you. Your time has expired.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, the next caller is 818. The last four digits is 7719. Please unmute yourself and identify yourself and which items you'd like to speak on.
Greetings. It's Eric Previn from Studio City. I'll speak on all items in a brief general comment.
Okay. 3 minutes. You may begin.
Okay. I'll start quickly by saying, there's a pandemic, so I think the Alfresco dining program is important, and whereas I appreciate both sets of comments about, the streets being dirty and the sidewalks being for pedestrians, I think common sense, and as one of the speakers mentioned, the presence of humans will make the decisions that the restaurants make appropriate, but it's got to move forward for public safety and health, in my opinion, that people continue during the pandemic to eat outdoors. Regarding oversized vehicles, I just would applaud Krikorian, Wesson, and I forget who the third one is, probably Bond, I can't remember, CD12, John Lee, for, once again, in a pandemic, trying to make it punitive for a person in a container in which they can sleep to be there. It's just unthinkably wrong to do it. So, again, kudos, because that's the kind of stuff you guys like to do. It's a totally abhorrent action where we should be continuing to forgive some of these problems during this time when also there's a homelessness crisis, to say the least. What can I tell you? It's extremely upsetting. Now, moving on to the transportation plan. Now, here's one in O'Farrell's district, in the mayor, who in 2008, they agreed to take a giant sum of $900,000 to arrange around a development of transportation. Well, I saw a neighborhood transportation plan, and my head almost popped off, because here in Studio City, we had the same kind of activity where the council member arranged, although nobody was paying except above the board, like in the developer bribing the council district. Here, all the payments were made quietly to Krikorian as contributors decided that it would be a good idea to move traffic one way and not the other on Carpenter Avenue in front of a public school. Now, Krikorian's little hench person did a terrible job of outreach intentionally. It's called minimum requirementalism, wherein they notify the people who are sympathetic and don't tell the poor slobs who will be screwed. Now, in that case, it's all of the Angelinos coming over Laurel Canyon during the rush hour because they all come to the right or to the left. These neighbors are trying to say, don't come to our side. Go straight and get away from us. It's not appropriate. It's fostering the wrong kind of thing, and this was never intended to be, as the pretenders pretend, some sort of a private access way for the parents at that school or whatever. So, terrible idea. No thanks to Barry Johnson and Jessica Fugate for trying to push that through, and no thanks to Randy Freed of our neighborhood council, who looked away on Yom Kippur as they were holding the great outreach meeting that nobody attended. So, this is a very, very dirty business. And Gibson Transportation, the people who were behind it, a firm that gets hired by various council districts to do these kinds of things, took a lot of money and, also were contributing liberally to Caro Tarosian. She was running for CD7. So that is just simply...
Thank you. Your time is expired.
What about my general public comment?
That was 3 minutes, solid one.
What about the special meeting?
That was included in the previous comment. In the time allocation.
No, I'm sorry. Well, I disagree with that. I'd like to give a comment on the special item, which is
You're done, Mr. Previn. Thank you.
With the clean transit zero.
Okay. Next caller is 323. Last four digits 0368. Please identify yourself and which items you'd like to speak on.
Hi, yes, my name is Bill Zide. I'm the former president of the Hollywood Studio District Neighborhood Council, which I was on for 5 years. I'm commenting on item number 3, the Paseo development, which is the large Sears parcel, the old Sears. The history of that...
You have 1 minute. You may begin.
Thank you. So the history of that is that about $900,000 was set aside when Yuri Rapinski brought the project. It has transferred to different people over time. Anyway, some of that money was supposed to be set aside despite convoluted mechanics of where that went regarding the traffic and parking issues. Currently, anyone who knows the area knows both are pretty serious, and the issue with parking was to allow for the possibility of permit parking. However, recently 4 for this. They have raised the percentage level of the residents approving to 75%. It was not that originally, and I'm asking that it be considered as proper to return it back to the 50 or 60% level. It should be for a permit parking process, and to also allow the money that should have gone to this to go to it, and to the additional traffic issues which should concern Wilton and
thank you. Your time is expired.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. The next caller is a 213 number, last four digits 5803. Please identify yourself and which items you'd like to speak.
Hi, my name is Jacob Van Horn, and I'd like to make a general public comment and a comment on item number 5, please.
Okay, you'll have 2 minutes. You may begin.
Thank you, members of the council. I just wanted to thank you for the work you've done on the Alfresco program. I heard some of the previous callers, and I understand there's different sidewalk streets where they should go. Not every neighborhood is the same. My neighborhood in downtown Los Angeles, we've lost a lot of bars and restaurants. Some places the street isn't suitable. Other places the sidewalk's too small, so we need a variety of solutions. So that's why I think making the Alfresco program permanent would be great. I just ask that we move with expediency because we don't know how long this is going to last. We need to give our small businesses as big of a toolkit as possible to ensure that they stay open. I'd also ask that we make sure, I think right now the temporary program is scheduled to wind down on December 31st, that there isn't a gap in between the temporary program and the permanent program if it comes into existence, because it will hurt businesses to have to shut down and then ramp back up. I also ask, I believe in another motion, there's about $2 million pending to fund the temporary program. I believe that's through the ad hoc COVID committee. And when that does come forward, looking at actually refunding that to a higher amount, because so many businesses are desperate for this. We've lost, I would estimate, around 50% of ours, and we need these back, and we need new businesses to have a thriving neighborhood. Thank you very much for your time and attention to this.
Thank you. Okay, the next caller is a 310 number, last four digits 2111. Please identify yourself and which items you'd like to speak on.
Hi, my name is Frankie Holt, and I'd like to speak to item number 3.
Okay, you have 1 minute. You may begin.
Hi, my name is Frankie Holt. I'm also a board member of the Hollywood Studio District Neighborhood Council, but I'm speaking mostly for myself. And it's mostly in regards to the question about how is this money being used. We went to the outreach meetings, which were very well attended. I think over the 3 meetings, there were probably 400 people that attended. And we all were very concerned about really parking and safety for pedestrians and cyclists. And I guess I'm mostly just hoping to see how this money is being used, and I hope it's towards funding the staff to help with the preferential parking permits. We're trying to get the threshold down from 75 to 50%. Just looking for more information and your help with that. So thank you very much, and that ends my comments.
Thank you. Okay, the next caller is a 310 number that ends in 8736. Please identify yourself and which items you'd like to speak on.
Hi, my name is Mary Elise Lambert. I am a member of Valley Village, and I wanted to speak about the Slow Streets program.
Okay, you have 1 minute. You may begin.
Thank you, first of all, so much for implementing this program. I live in a little pocket of Valley Village right by the park, so we constantly have people coming into our neighborhood to and from the park. We actually don't have sidewalks in most of our area, so it can be very dangerous, and especially people tend to use our neighborhood as a pass-through to get to 170, so we have, over the past 3 years that I've lived here, had massive issues of people speeding through, and I was the one who applied for the Slow Slow Streets program in our neighborhood and have been the one spearheading the effort amongst all of our other neighbors to look after the signs. And I just wanted to reiterate everything that the gentleman from MacArthur Park said about how dangerous it is to have these temporary signs up. While they have been so wonderful in helping keeping our families and children especially safe while walking and biking in the streets to and from the park, it has been very dangerous since they are temporary structures. I've seen people plow through them, like he said, purposefully and accidentally. And if there's any chance that we could make this a permanent program and with some more, structures available with concrete, and metal signs to kind of make this a permanent program in our neighborhood and all the neighborhoods across the city that have been implementing this. That would be really wonderful.
Your time has expired. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, the next speaker is a 310 number, last four digits 6455. Please identify yourself and which items you'd like to speak on. Last four digits 6455. Please identify yourself and which items you'd like to speak on. If you need to unmute, it's *6. Please identify yourself. Okay, we can't hear you, so we'll go on to the next caller. Caller 323, last four digits 5959. Please identify yourself and which items you'd like to speak on.
Hi, my name is Michael Higgins, and I would like to speak on item number 3.
Okay, you have 1 minute. Please begin.
Great. Hi, my name is Michael Higgins, and I own the house on Lexington Avenue between Van Ness and Bronson for about 20 years now. And I've attended a few of the original outreach meetings, and I'm concerned about the disbursement of the funds for traffic and parking mitigation. I'd like to reduce the threshold from 75% to 50% for preferential parking in our neighborhood. Also, piggybacking onto that, our neighborhood is overwhelmingly behind getting speed bumps on our street for traffic and bicycle safety. That's it. Thanks.
Thank you. Okay, next caller is area code 917, last four digits 1895. Please identify yourself and which items you'd like to speak on. Caller 1895, I believe you're muted. Please press *6 in order to unmute yourself.
I'm unmuted now?
Okay. Yes, you are. Please identify yourself and which items you'd like to speak on.
My name is Todd Kessler, and I'd like to speak on safe streets.
Okay, you have 1 minute. Please begin.
Okay. I'm a resident of Packard Street near Hazard. We've been part of this Safe Street experiment. The feeling of myself and my neighbors is it's extremely successful. And this is really important to underline. This neighborhood has no walking access to any parks or any public space. So this, by accident, has solved that problem. We very much want to keep this, make this street permanent, and we will do anything we can to preserve it. Again, we pay taxes, but we have no park space, we have no public space. We want this street to remain the way it is. It's caused no traffic problems because no one drives down our street other than the people who live here. No one else needs to do that. That's all I have to say.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, next caller is area code 347, last four digits 9929. Please identify yourself and which items you'd like to speak on.
Hi, my name is Michael McDonald, and I'm calling on behalf of the Eagle Rock Association, also known as TERRA. I'm calling to make general comments and speak on special meeting item number 1 regarding slow streets.
Okay, you have 2 minutes. You may begin.
TERRA is proud to have been one of the first sponsors for Slow Streets in bringing this program to Northeast Los Angeles. The Slow Streets program has been well received within our community at a time when residents are eager for opportunities to get exercise and fresh air while improving safety on our local streets. However, the effectiveness of the installations have been limited by use of non-durable installation materials that unfortunately are frequently damaged by drivers and place an unnecessary burden on our resident volunteers in maintaining these installations. We ask that the Department of Transportation improve Slow Street installations with 3 elements. 1, durable signage at entrances to and within Slow Street installations. 2, durable barriers within the roadway that physically discourage cut-through and speeding drivers. And 3, add relevant road markings such as sharrows where slow streets have been located on streets identified in the city's Neighborhood Enhanced Network. We will be submitting written comments to expand on these points, but wanted to communicate that we support this motion and look forward to working with the city to improve Eagle Rock slow street installations as described in options 1 and 2. Thank you again for your efforts and for your time.
Thank you. Okay, next speaker, last 4 digits, 7660. Please press *6 to unmute yourself and identify yourself and which items you'd like to speak on.
My name is Leon Slonovic. Let's make a general public comment.
Okay, you have 60 seconds. Please begin.
I represent Taxi Worker Association of Los Angeles. The LADOT and this committee has undertaken a massive and unsubstantiated reform of the taxi industry. The plan has no equivalent in existence. It is not based on any verifiable data. It is not workable. There isn't a system that has, for transportation, that has succeeded with an open market, especially with predatory companies like Uber and Lyft. You're now fighting the very model that it's based on. We cannot afford the millions and billions of dollars that are spent to mislead the public and endanger the passengers and exploit the drivers.
Thank you. Your time has expired. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, next caller is last 4 digits, 2028. Please press *6 to unmute yourself, identify yourself, and which items you'd like to speak on.
My name is Oren Hadar, representing Destination Pico, and I'd like to speak on the slow streets.
Okay, you have 1 minute. Please begin.
Destination Pico manages the mid-city slow streets in Packard and Saturn, and our slow streets have been an overwhelming success. We recently did a survey of residents that received over 500 responses, and 85% of respondents indicated that they want them to be made permanent. And over 50% use the streets every day. And so while we are extremely supportive of this motion, I'm also personally a little concerned that the program hasn't been implemented equitably. Only 35% of the slow streets are in areas considered high need. The program, the application for the first, I think, 2 months was only available in English. And so while I'm incredibly in favor of making the slow streets permanent, I also urge LADOT not to stop implementing new slow streets and to place more focus on areas that don't have as much political power and organizations as the neighborhoods that have already received the slow streets. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, next caller is last 4 digits, 4818. Please press *6 to unmute yourself and identify yourself and which items you'd like to speak on. 4818. Please press star 6 and identify yourself.
Hi, my name is Doug Haynes, and I wish to speak on items 3, 5, and general public comment.
Okay. You have 3 minutes. You may begin.
Thank you. The Neighborhood Traffic Management Plan for item 3 is the result of a legal settlement between our neighborhood association and the city over a project at the former Sears site in Hollywood. $900,000 was allocated by the developer for the project's neighborhood traffic impacts, but at the time, the money was instead diverted to an internal CD13 fund. The settlement we obtained resulted in restoring this funding and having 3 packed public hearings on mitigation measures with hundreds of residents requesting permit parking and speed humps. Yet DOT has refused to change its policy requiring a 75% signature threshold, making the most impacted blocks impossible to sign up to obtain relief. DOT has also unfortunately shrugged off the implementation of other critical mitigation measures that are roundly supported by this community. And I will add that the $900,000 is supposed to be available in complete sum for these mitigation measures. There is no reason for this, and it counters the language of the settlement requiring transparency and cooperation. And I ask that DOT and CD13 abide by the agreement and discuss these issues with us prior to this matter going to council in order to resolve our concerns. On general public comment, I want to say that I serve on the boards of 2 Hollywood neighborhood councils and chair the planning committee for one, and that with the proliferation of transit-oriented communities projects that have almost no off-street parking, we're seeing quiet residential blocks being upended by vastly out-of-scale development that overwhelms the available street parking. As one example, there is a block in our area that currently has less than 50 units, both in single-family homes and apartment buildings, that a developer has proposed to add 188 luxury units with only 54 unbundled parking stalls, meaning that you have to separately pay for the parking stall, a third of which of those stalls are tandem stalls. This is crazy, and what results is that you have a quiet residential street that suddenly is overwhelmed by these projects, and then people try to get preferential parking, but they cannot obtain all the signatures necessary because of the 75% threshold. I recall that Councilman Koretz proposed at one point to make sure that these projects cannot have preferential parking and that they not be included in the signature requirement. And I would ask if you're going to continue with these TOC projects that have almost no parking and put the burden on the community because the people who live in these luxury units are not taking public transportation, that policy be implemented or some other way be figured out to obtain relief on these matters. It's a critical issue for us. We have some of the highest density in our census tracts, not only in Los Angeles, but in the United States, and people drive cars and they need a place to park. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Okay, next caller is last four digits 7222. Please press star 6 to unmute yourself, identify yourself, and which items you'd like to speak on.
Hi, my name is Dasler Jimenez. I'm a board member from the Hollywood Studio Neighborhood Council, and actually, I was going to talk about the parking permits in the slow streets. Something regarding already my colleague Doug Haynes already said. We have a lot of.
You have 2 minutes. Please begin.
Okay. We have a lot of, struggling doing the petitions for parking permits since my street on Barton Avenue between Wilton and Webster Avenue. There are a lot of, development going on right now, like, empty lots, empty houses, and everything. So it's been really hard for us to get the 75% of the city required for parking permits. So I'm, suggesting maybe to lower down, a little bit, maybe 60%, because there's a lot of streets here in my neighborhood. They have been empty lots, empty houses, empty buildings, new buildings. They haven't even, been 30%, vacancy. So it's hard to find, those 75% in the neighborhood. So also in the slow streets, we need something, more stable to put in, in the corners, because those signs people that always run over, and they take it away, they rip it away, they rip it apart, and there was, roads break in the night, late in the night, at 1 o'clock in the morning, cars racing all over the streets, so it's very dangerous for the people. So that's all my comments.
Thank you. Okay, the next caller is last 4 digits 0933. Please press *6 to unmute yourself, identify yourself, and which items you'd like to speak on.
Hi, I'm Scott Kiner. I am a volunteer for the Slow Streets in East Hollywood and would like to speak on that. Thank you very much for implementing Slow Streets in the first place. It's been a huge help to my neighborhood and made our streets a lot safer. The street I live on, people used to use as a pass-through to avoid a four-way stop 1 block away. Speeding and going as fast as possible down our street. Slow Streets has helped a lot with that. And it's been great for the safety of the many children and retirees that live on my street and in the area. That said, the temporary signs have required daily maintenance and have repeatedly been removed and are destroyed and run over. I've had to spend my own money to repair them, to add reflective tape to make them more effective, and it's basically a daily affair to put them back in place and make sure that they're there. So I wanted to advocate for option number 1, to have permanent signage put in place to make the Slow Streets permanent, with permanent metal signage, because I think that's the only way to make it sustainable. But once again, I wanted to thank you, LADOT, for implementing the program. I think it's a great thing for our neighborhood, and I hope it will become permanent with permanent signage.
Thank you. Okay, and the last caller is last 4 digits 4828. Please press *6 to unmute yourself and identify yourself and which items you'd like to speak on.
Hello?
Yes.
Hello. Hi, my name is Jillian Schultz. I'm the Vice President of East Hollywood Neighborhood Council, and I'm calling to speak about the Slow Streets program.
Okay, you have 1 minute. Please begin.
Thanks. So, echoing the sentiments of my fellow volunteer Slow Street monitor and maintainer, Scott, who just spoke, we're very appreciative of the program and have seen really, really positive impact on the community. In particular, East Hollywood has a total lack of green space. Our one green space, Barnsdall Park, has been closed for 6+ months due to the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic. And having places for residents of East Hollywood to be able to recreate outdoors while maintaining social distance is really vital. As the person who applied for Slow Streets on behalf of East Hollywood Neighborhood Council and is responsible for coordinating the volunteers that are maintaining it, I'm deeply concerned about my safety and the safety of my fellow volunteers who are out in the streets daily to pick up these signs that, as we've heard, are not permanent, are not sufficient, get moved, get knocked over, get relocated, are not reflective for nighttime driving. So I too firmly advocate for implementing option 1 to put in place more permanent signage for the Slow Streets program. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, that concludes public comment with everybody who raised their hands. I will turn it back over to the chair.
Thank you, Mr. Bruins. Okay, colleagues, having heard the public comment, I will recommend that we approve the general manager's or receive the general manager's report and approve on consent items 2, 3, 4, and 7. 7 amended with the technical corrections we heard before we took public comment.
I'll move that recommendation, Mr. Chair.
Very good. Committee members, I will take a voice vote on the approval of items 2, 3, 4, and 7. 7 as amended to incorporate the changes introduced by the CLA. Mr. Bond?
Aye.
Mr. Bruscaino?
Aye.
Mr. Koretz?
Aye.
Thank you. Those items pass.
Thank you. And we received the general manager's report. So that will bring us to item number 5.
Item number 5 is an LADOT report relative to an overview, update, and next steps for street dining and lane closures to support essential workers and businesses for the LA Alfresco program.
Good afternoon. I'm Liz McCarran, a supervising transportation planner with LADOT, and today I'll be presenting an update and next steps for LA Alfresco's on-street dining program. LA Alfresco is a COVID-19 emergency response program to support restaurants and help them comply with public health directives during these economically challenging times. Mayor Garcetti issued directives across multiple city departments to streamline requirements and approvals for outdoor dining. There are 3 alfresco options available to restaurants: dining on sidewalks, in private parking lots, or on the street. Local businesses have expressed overwhelming demand for LA Alfresco. To date, over 2,000 restaurants have received approval for one or more of the alfresco outdoor dining options. LADOT has installed 52 curbside dining areas and 5 lane closures, supporting 76 restaurants with on-street dining. We have provided traffic control devices and shade umbrellas at no cost to the businesses. LADOT is directing 55% of current program resources to businesses in impacted communities. These are neighborhoods that have suffered significant job losses due to COVID-19 or that are historically disadvantaged. Due to the success of the program, LADOT has exhausted our initial supply of traffic control devices and shade umbrellas. But as outlined in the report, LADOT will repurpose funds programmed for open streets events, such as Ciclavia, that have been canceled due to the pandemic, in order to expand alfresco on-street dining. LADOT will use these funds to support restaurants in impacted communities by installing up to 20 additional curbside dining areas and at least 20 additional lane closures. Further, in an attempt to address unmet needs citywide, LADOT is working in coordination with partner departments to launch a program that will allow restaurants to sponsor their own on-street dining area after site review and approval by LADOT. We expect on-street dining through the LA Alfresco program to iterate as the needs of businesses evolve through the pandemic and as we use our experience to improve project delivery. And with that, I'll thank you and we can take questions.
Thank you very much. That was a good and succinct report, which I appreciate. So let me just ask a couple questions. I think first of all, it's worth noting that this has been a remarkably successful program, really beyond, I think, the imagination of some of us, like me and Mr. Buscaino, who were pushing to get it launched. And as we continue to live with coronavirus and the public health restrictions, it's been a critical part of keeping people, diners and workers, safe. It's popular with businesses, with customers, with residents, and the consensus in support of a program that repurposes parking and street space is really pretty unprecedented in Los Angeles, and it's been great to see. The next item on the agenda is about potential for making Alfresco permanent. So for this conversation, colleagues, I want to limit to the discussion of the existing program, and we can take up the permanent one with the next item, just so we can keep the conversation clear. Just a couple things. For funding, you and your report state that we're almost completely out of current resources, so you're focusing on disadvantaged businesses, and that makes sense from an equity perspective with limited resources. So a couple questions. How quickly would the self-fund permit option become available?
This is something that we've been working on for the last month or so. I think we are preparing to do a soft launch of the program where we take people who are already in our queue who have applied and work through the self-install process with a few of those applicants before launching to the broader restaurant community.
Okay. How long do you think before we launch to the broader? I suspect I know a number that are in the queue already, but...
Councilman, this is Dan Mitchell with LADOT, Assistant General Manager. So in addition to this report, there's also been a motion to apply up to $2 million of CARES funding for this program. And if that is in fact approved, that will be the priority method for rapidly deploying this program as far as we can. Following that, we would reevaluate after the beginning of the year whether a do-it-yourself program is in fact necessary. But in the meantime, as Rose described, we'll be exploring that with people who are currently in the queue in anticipation of that approval.
Okay, so you sort of anticipated my next question, which was about the CARES Act funding. Let me just clarify. Are you saying with the CARES Act funding we would expand the self-pay, or with the CARES Act funding, would that give us enough funds to continue serving all businesses?
It would provide funding to continue serving all businesses, and then after the first of the year, when we're no longer eligible for that funding, would explore the need for a do-it-yourself program, should the need continue to exist.
Got it. So one of the things I've heard from businesses who are thinking about the potential of the self-funding is that they want more certainty before they're willing to invest their own money. And so what I'd like to propose, and I'll do it in a recommendation at the end of the discussion, is that we provide some certainty by extending the program for at least 6 months after the local state of emergency ends, whatever that is, sort of as we've done with renter protections. We have said, the renter protections apply for X months after the expiration of the emergency order, and I think there's something we may want to do with that here. And my final set of questions is about the high-speed streets. Are there any examples of Alfresco programs on streets with higher speed limits?
Yes, we have been able to install a few curbside dining areas on 35-mile-an-hour streets. These have been in very specific circumstances where there's angled parking and a bike lane separating the parking from vehicle travel. With engineering judgment, we deem these locations to be safe. In addition, with lane closures, we have installed lane closures on 35-mile-per-hour streets with more intense equipment using concrete K-rail and crash cushions to keep diners safe.
Yeah, you guys are being very good at anticipating what my next question was, because I was just about to ask about the K-rails, because I'm wondering if, I know that about half of the restaurants that applied for curbside were denied because of the speed issue, and so I was wondering if we might be able to bump that up, do it more safely with stronger barricades like the Jersey barriers and stuff like that. I assume part of the issue there is lack of funding for the sturdier materials. Is that it?
Councilmember, the Dan Mitchell again, Assistant General Manager. The main concern there is that with the higher rate of speed, we make a change to the character of the street so that we are reducing speeds. And that's exactly the approach we've taken with the partial closures. So we are closing either the parking lane or even one lane of travel using those heavier K-rail concrete railings to better protect the dining area and make it more comfortable.
So is doing that more frequently a funding issue or an engineering issue?
Well, it is both, and it's also a function of the number of requests that we receive. So since this is an application-based program, we also are considering the demand for those particular treatments.
Got it. Okay, colleagues, any questions? Mr. Buscaino, did you have your hand up?
Yeah, that's fine. Thank you. And like you, Mr. Bonin, I just wanted to recognize on behalf of a grateful number of restaurateurs, not only in Mr. Bonin's district, but my district. This program has been very instrumental in trying to get their feet back, literally put food on the table, not only for the restaurateurs, but also for their customers. It's been very successful, streamlined, easy. So I want to recognize the department along with this entire city family for making this work, and Mayor Garcetti for launching this Alfresco program. Happy to partner with them as well. For us, it was we saw some of our disadvantaged communities not take part of this. We don't know if it was more of an educational thing. I'm happy to hear the department move in on identifying some of these locations in disadvantaged communities and want to make sure they are equal participants in this Alfresco program. So what I'm gathering by the presentation, for those the equity piece, the city number of departments are helping in focusing their attention to the disadvantaged communities to promote the Alfresco program. Is that what I'm gathering?
Yes, as part of the program, we anticipate executing a contract with Ciclavia, and part of that contract will be for outreach specifically to these disadvantaged communities to make sure they're aware of the program and help them to apply.
I appreciate that. Also recognize over 2,500 authorizations to date, nearly 2,000 restaurants. So when we launched in the historic downtown San Pedro area, we found other restaurants wanting to take part. And I'll get to looking at a permanent side of advancing permanently on this in the next item, as indicated by Mr. Chair. But we also heard loud and clear that, what do we need to do to have a full street closure? And I'm just speaking on what I'm hearing from restaurateurs and also customers down at the downtown San Pedro area. How is the full lane closure, how is that working out in other parts of the city?
So we recommend that for a full lane closure, a group of restaurants or an organization like a Chamber of Commerce or a BID help organize a closure to help us. We don't have the resources to do tremendous outreach to do this type of program. So we ask that a group of restaurants or an organization come together and submit an application. And once they submit an application through the portal, which is the same system as curbside dining, it takes about 15 minutes to complete an application, then LADOT will review and implement where appropriate.
And what was the turnaround time on getting back on the closure authorizations?
The closure authorizations have been, we get a lot of applications, but a lot of them are by individual businesses, so they aren't necessarily eligible. The turnaround time is a little bit longer because we have to take some time to create a design and figure out if that location is appropriate or not. I would say the estimate is about 2 to 3 weeks.
And in the 24 closure authorizations, are you finding folks practicing social distancing and respecting the CDC guidelines?
We do have an enforcement arm through Streets LA that does spot inspections and responds to complaints. I would have to check with them to get statistics about the social distancing aspect.
Because that was one of the concerns we had here in my district, that if we do shut down the street, then you'll see thousands of people just because they're thirsting for an opportunity to hang out and be outside and enjoy good food while not practicing social distancing. So,
right. As part of the program, we do ask applicants to self-certify that they will follow the county's guideline on creating that distance at their restaurants. So I can check in with Streets LA to see if they've been issuing any notices of violations on that.
Yeah, I'd like to know if you can just send that to my office or Mr. Chair, however you want to deal with that, Mike. That's all I've got. Thank you.
Mr. Kretz.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We've been getting positive feedback, too, as I imagine every council member that has these in their district is getting. It's a very positive program and a way to keep some businesses in business that I think would go under otherwise. A few things. A couple of the application denials that businesses received didn't really make sense. So I'd like to have the opportunity to have my staff take a look at those with you and see if there's a way to make them work. So number one, we'd like to contact you on that and go over them.
Sure, we'd be happy to do that.
And while my district doesn't get much in the way of discretionary funds, the way most other council districts do, I made sure we transferred some funds to help businesses would implement their outdoor dining and safety protocols, like adding K-rail. But if we tried to do that for very many businesses, we would go broke in that fund almost instantly. So obviously could use some help. And while CD5 traditionally isn't an impacted community, as a result of the damage from the civil unrest, particularly on Melrose, which is pretty devastated, I'd like to ask that the department consider giving those areas some sort of special dispensation, so they're not just viewed as an area that traditionally is fine because they have been heavily damaged, and a number of businesses probably will go under without that kind of help. So I hope you'll consider that. Also, I don't know if there are any state or federal grants we can apply to cover some of the costs of the Alfresco program, so that restaurants that are just about broke and on the edge of going under don't have to be the ones to need to self-fund, if we could find a way to get some sort of other programming. So have we looked at other grants to see whether there's anything possible out there that we can use?
Well, we do have the motion being heard in the ad hoc committee on Wednesday regarding the CARES Act funding. That would potentially provide $2 million to help fund the program. And in addition to the funding that we believe we could reprogram from the Open Streets grants, that would be sufficient to keep the program going for quite some time. We can take a look into whether there are some other grants that will allow us to keep the program going longer term.
Okay, because it's obviously helping some folks, but right now it's not targeted to help an overwhelmingly large number of folks in the city. And I think we still will lose some businesses otherwise. Also, I think some of the applicants that were denied based on confusion of the application, what the program exactly was and how to apply for it. So I wonder if we could look at creating a clear application so it's more self-explanatory and businesses fully understand what they're asking for. As far as Council District 5, if you could send me a list of the denials in my district, we'd like to have a chance to review them and see which ones failed just because of confusion and how they applied.
Yes, we can provide that to you.
And one last question on this. Have we done much in the way of compliance? Because I see, obviously, anytime you drive, you can see these all over the major streets. And there are some that do a great job of compliance with protocols. And there are a couple that I've personally called in a few times with no success, where diners are elbow to elbow with the diners at their next table, and their waiters and waitresses aren't using PPE, etc., and are without a doubt contributing to some spread. So how are we dealing with the compliance on these?
I believe some of those are, I can let Dan speak to that.
Yeah, Councilmember Dan Mitchell, LADOT Assistant General Manager. I'll just relay that this also is an application-based program. So our focus is on establishing the ability for these partner restaurants to set up outdoor dining, to provide them the flexibility to do that. But it is really up to the individual restaurant owners to ensure that they're complying with all the state and county health requirements.
Well, presumably, if they're not, we don't want to keep them in business in this way without correcting it. So is there a current process to review how some of these sites are. It could be done relatively easily because you don't even have to enter a restaurant. You can literally drive by and in a second you can see whether they're wildly out of compliance or doing a great job.
Councilmember, I believe that Rose mentioned we are working with, that Streets LA has taken on the enforcement function. So they're doing spot checks of these locations to check in and see if restaurateurs are complying with both the physical distancing requirements and other things that are required by the CDC and County Public Health. If you have specific examples, we'd be happy to pass these to Streets LA and ask them to go and do those spot checks. They're really the department. This is a multi-departmental program. Planning is involved, building and safety is involved, the fire department, DOT, and Streets LA because of all of its moving parts. And some of these restaurants get approval to be in the street. Some of them are on the sidewalk. Some of them are in their private lots. And Streets LA really has the enforcement function. So for the whole city, as they do for other things that their investigators go out and write tickets for and give warnings. So we're happy to pass that along. They're the entity responsible for the enforcement piece.
Do you have any sense of how successful compliance has been?
We can, I think Councilmember Buscaino had a similar question, and we will check in with Streets LA and be happy to report back on that.
Thank you.
Mr. Buscaino, do you have something else?
Again, just hearing the feedback, maybe different parts of the city. To Mr. Koretz's point, even that evening, the mayor came out and announced the program. We had our restaurants go online. The portal was very friendly, user-friendly. They were able to apply, print out, and move forward. Again, just our experiences may have been a little bit different in other parts of the city, but again, it was user-friendly and streamlined, and I just encourage the city family here before us to make it as easy as possible for our restaurants who've been taking a significant hit in the course of the last 8 months or so. Thank you.
We really appreciate that, and I just want to give a ton of credit to Rose and Mariana, who's also on the call, and other folks in Connie Llanos' team responsible for setting this up. It was a Herculean effort, and they've done a great job creating something entirely new out of whole cloth. And an idea that I think is just a seed that started in your district, council member, and hopefully will grow into a much larger program over the next year that potentially will live on after we've made it past the pandemic, because it's been such a huge success.
Hear, hear. Thank you.
Okay, yeah, echoing the kudos. Are so happy with it, we want to give you even more work. It will. So what I'd like to do is recommend we receive and file the LADOT report. Also instruct LADOT to extend the LA Alfresco program, including the street dining temporary use authorization program, until at least 6 months after the end of the city's Safer LA emergency order. And instruct DOT to report back with solutions or suggestions for implementing Alfresco on streets with higher speed limits. And Mr. Buscaino, was there a report back you wanted to add to that?
Yeah, just on the compliance, Mr. Kretz and I'd like to hear on the compliance. And did you include that?
Sure. Yeah. Great. Okay. So do we have a motion on that?
So moved.
Second. Okay, let's do the roll, Mr.
Committee members, you are receiving and filing the LA DOT report with additional instructions from Mr. Bonin and Mr. Buscaino and Mr. Koretz. Mr. Bonin.
Aye.
Mr. Buscaino.
Aye.
Mr. Koretz.
Aye.
The action passes.
Great, thank you very much. And that brings us now to the related item, item number 6.
Item number 6 is a Rube Buscaino motion directing the CLA, DOT, BOE, and with the assistance of the Bureau of Street Services, Departments of Building and Safety and City Planning, and the City Attorney to report relative to the feasibility of developing a permanent Alfresco program that allows for a streamlined outdoor dining permit process, including but not limited to a potential program structure, eligibility criteria, safety and infrastructure requirements, and a plan that would enable interested business to opt in to the permit program.
Okay, Dan, is there anything you and Rosemary want to say? We also have Justin here from CD4, the maker of the motion. Justin, is there anything you'd like to say to kick us off?
I have a few points to make. I'll be quick if that's all right with you, Mr. Chair.
Sure.
Great. So firstly, thank you for the opportunity to address the committee. It goes without saying that the pandemic, combined with business closures and measures needed to protect the health and safety of Angelenos, have had a detrimental effect on businesses, small and large. When the pandemic hit, the city worked quickly to ensure that our first responders had protective equipment that they needed. We moved quick to ramp up testing, to bring our unhoused neighbors in off the streets, to ensure our seniors who are part of the city's in-home or congregate meal programs continued to receive those meals, and provide protections from eviction for renters and small business owners who have been impacted by COVID. However, understanding the ripple effect that the pandemic created, we also looked for creative ways to get businesses back up and running while also adhering to health and safety precautions. So in early May, Councilmember Rue introduced a motion asking city staff to develop a temporary no-fee administrative approval process for outdoor, sidewalk, and parking lot dining that could be granted once restaurant dining resumed. Mr. Chair, you introduced a similar motion, as did Councilmembers Buscaino and Rodriguez, and we were incredibly pleased to see the mayor respond so quickly with the Alfresco program. And while there's always fine-tuning to be done, our office has received glowing reviews of the program, which by all accounts has been a lifeline for a number of restaurants in the city. But we've also been thinking ahead about how we get small businesses back up and running post-pandemic and make sure it's as easy as possible for them to do so. So in August, Councilmember Rue introduced the motion before you today, asking city staff to report back on the feasibility of making the Alfresco program permanent. Outdoor dining in cities like Miami, Paris, Rome, and other large metropolitan cities is commonplace, and LA's climate, at least before noon and after 5 p.m., provides a perfect opportunity to put in place a program that would allow restaurants to scale up business post-pandemic while also enhancing our sense of community in neighborhoods across LA. This is just the beginning of what we imagine will be a comprehensive discussion on the proposal. There are still a number of questions that need to be answered. So, for example, once day-to-day activity resumes, on-street dining that requires the closure of a parking lane or a vehicle lane may be difficult, not to mention costly for the city to maintain. We know from discussions with BOE that the permitting mechanism for the temporary program isn't ideal, and there will be questions about existing parking requirements. But once again, this is just the beginning of the conversation, and while DOT is looking at how we make the program more sustainable for the remainder of the year, particularly with regard to permitting self-funded projects, Councilmember Rue believes it would be beneficial to also start thinking about the development of a permanent Alfresco program. So with that said, I thank you for your time, and I'd be happy to answer any questions I can.
Thank you. I like this proposal. It's the kind of thing that, I think most people jump to an intuitive yes on. It's a simple concept to embrace. It's a really difficult and complicated thing to put in place. I would love to see more outdoor dining in Los Angeles, like so many other cities. It would be phenomenal, and I hope we can get to it. But I don't want to undersell how difficult it's going to be. I mean, we had so little here because of the way the city's system is designed, and there's things like ordinances and codes and standards that get in the way, and some of those can be changed. But then there's also, there may be something in a community plan or a specific plan that prohibits it, or there are so many parking requirements by code or by conditional use permit that allowing somebody to permanently use the parking lot is going to be a huge barrier. So I hope we can get there. It's going to be a bit of going through a thicket getting there. Scano.
Mr. Chair, you're absolutely right on how stringent the processes can be. I can tell you, for one, it took us 3 damn years for us to get our dining platform pilot program in the downtown San Pedro in partnership with our business improvement district. We were able to implement a strategy for outdoor dining to increase business visibility and create more pedestrian-friendly downtown area. Get this, just in the fall of 2019, nearly a year ago, we received approval from the Board of Public Works for our outdoor dining pilot program. And this effort was initially meant to be a business development tool to expand the footprint of our businesses along 6th and 7th Streets. And then COVID-19 hit, and now it's been become a means for survival for these businesses in my district. We've been fortunate, Mr. Chair and Mr. Kretz and those on the call, we've been very fortunate enough to have an outdoor dining program in place when the pandemic began. Without it, our downtown areas would have not survived. And as we've seen, our businesses in Los Angeles have not been so, other businesses in LA have not been so lucky. And just as Justin indicated, and Justin, I appreciate the Dodger beard rally. I got some whiskers growing along with you, so hopefully they win this World Series and we can shave. Or maybe not. I don't know why you have your beard, but I got this going on for the Dodgers. So, as Justin indicated, cities around the world and the country, quite frankly, LA is behind when it comes to outdoor dining and seating in the public right away in most major cities in the nation. Even from what I've seen through my affiliation with NLC, cities have figured out a way to make permanent outdoor dining platforms cost-effective for businesses without bureaucratic red tape, and it's time for LA to catch up, quite frankly. We've had a great opportunity here. We've seen incredible success through the Alfresco program to ensure that this tool does not have an expiration date when the Safer at Home order is lifted. I would ask that the San Pedro outdoor dining platform be used as a model for the creation of a permanent outdoor dining policy. And Mr. Chair, you're right. It's like again, it can take years to get something like this done, but we already did it. R&D, repeat and duplicate rather. That's how it should be done. So I asked, in partnership with Mr. Rue, DOT to work alongside the Bureau of Engineering to create a ministerial process as a guiding document for the creation and approval of outdoor dining platforms in the public right-of-way. And creating this process that's cost-effective and easy to manage will mean all the difference in the world to our small businesses that have been hit hard by the pandemic. I look forward to working with you, the chairman, Mr. Rue, the city departments, on creating a permanent outdoor dining program. I encourage those listening to come take a look at what's taking shape in downtown San Pedro, and no excuses for you, Mr. Bonin. You have family down here. I'd be more than happy to go to the newest Italian restaurant, Bocca Felice, in the heart of Little Italy. But we have to work together to ensure that the most vulnerable businesses have a bright future ahead, despite the storm that they're enduring today. In fact, we're hearing from the restaurateurs that with this dining platform, it's double, even triple the amount of space. So once we do get back up and running post COVID-19, they're going to be very successful. So that's what we owe it to our restaurant businesses at every corner of the city. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Kress, did you have something yet?
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would chime in and say I've been a huge fan of outdoor dining in general, going back to my days as a council member in West Hollywood and helping that city to become friendlier to outdoor dining over 20 years ago. So I'm happy to see this continue and streamline the process for applying. I do have some of the same concerns that were mentioned in passing I'm not sure that we want a bunch of K-rails in the street of major boulevards with a 35 or 40 mile an hour speed limit once we're completely past the COVID pandemic. So I think there may be steps that we'll want to take as long as we're dealing with this as sort of an emergency outlet to allow places to stay in business. There may be locations where dining is taking place where we might not find it as desirable in a non-emergency situation. So we'll have to look at both some of the streets where it may not be something we want to see permanently on the actual street, and some of the parking lots where we might want to see the parking return rather than being an emergency outlet for the restaurants to be able to stay in business during the COVID era. So I'm glad we're doing it, but I agree this needs to be done with some care, and it's more complicated than it might look.
Thank you. So what I'd recommend is that we approve as amended as follows. That we also add the fire department to the list of departments that are part of it. And that also that we ask, I guess, city attorney to report back with a list of ordinances or codes or standards, things like specific plans or conditional use permits that we'll have to work through in order to effectuate this. Motion to approve.
So,
Mr. Briscana, do you second? Second, nod. So let's do a roll call, Mr. Clerk.
Very good, committee members. The action is to approve the motion as amended, to ask to add the fire department, and to ask city attorney to report back on various matters that will need to be modified to make permanent the program. Mr. Bonnet.
Again, just so that we don't have to go through the same thing we have for 3 years, if you could just take a look at the San Pedro pilot, that'd be really helpful.
Add that as a recommendation, Mr. Bonnet.
Yep.
We'll add that as another recommendation to the report. So again, we'll put the roll call again. Mr. Bonnet?
If I could ask everybody who's not speaking to go on mute because there's a lot of feedback. So my vote is aye.
Mr. Bruce Payne?
Aye.
And Mr. Koretz? Mr. Koretz? Mr. Koretz, your microphone is off?
Aye.
Okay, so 3 ayes. Thank you, council members.
It's a great item. Good work, y'all.
Great. That brings us to item number S1.
Okay, in the special meeting, item number 1 is an LADOT report and resolution relative to the department's innovative clean transit zero emission rollout plan.
Yes, Council, my name is Kara Dadarian. I'm the division head for transit development. Quick update, in 2018, the CARB board adopted the innovative clean transit regulations for transit agencies to be able to migrate to zero emission buses by 2040. As your honorable body knows, that the City Council passed a motion, Council File 170739, directing LADOT to transition to zero emission buses by 2030, 10 years ahead of the CARB board requirements. So at this time, we're requesting the Council adopt the LADOT zero emission rollout plan and be able to submit it to the CARB board. It's important to note that the city's rollout plan is based on the council-directed timeline of 2030. The plan is a living document. It allows for annual updates and has reporting requirements annually, so we will update the documents as we move forward.
Thank you. Colleagues, any questions?
Just a comment if I can.
Okay, you're unmuted, so go ahead, Joe.
Oh, sorry. How's that better?
Yeah, you're good.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just as an appointee, the EQMD appointee over the last 7 years, we've invested as a district millions of dollars in a variety of air cleaning technologies and programs. We for the bus replacement for schools was our top priority as an EQMD body, but we knew that was just a start and we needed willing partners to step up for passenger bus fleets. Happy to see this item before us. As usual, our own LADOT accepted that challenge. I want to thank your leadership, Mr. Bonin, not only wearing the chairman's hat here, but also your advocacy on the MTA. We realize that we're at the beginning of these transitions, but want to make sure that we do this right. Electric power modes of transportation are coming, and we need to make sure that we're ready. And as LADOT plans out power needs and charging locations, we ought to co-locate with other departments and their respective needs. So this motion specifically indicates disadvantaged communities, but to be clear, there are the environmental justice communities. These are clearly the EJ communities, and particularly in my district, in Wilmington and in Watts. So let's make sure that this is where we start. Just a question on I'd like to know how far we are in achieving our goal of 100% zero emissions bus fleet. And secondly, with the report, it sounds like clean vehicles will be deployed first in disadvantaged communities, which I'm very supportive of given the nature of the communities I represent. But can you walk us through the details on how we'll be deploying these?
Sure, Councilman. Currently, LADOT does have 156 buses on order, all electric. Of those 25, which are Proterra buses, we've already received the first one and are operating it in downtown Route A. The remaining 24 will be delivered by March of 2021. We electric bus coming in December of 2020, which is part of our 130 bus order of dash buses. The challenge that we have is the charging infrastructure that we've been trying to develop when it comes to distribution of the buses at the different routes. Currently, we have installed 13 chargers at our commercial facility. And what we've also done is we've standardized our buses to all accept DC charging. So we will have the ability to interoperate the chargers with the buses. So from the bus perspective, moving forward, I believe our next bus order of 22 buses will be done in 2022 as part of our normal vehicle replacement cycle. So we are well on our way from the bus procurement perspective. We do have some challenges associated with electrifying our facilities, especially one of them being exactly what you mentioned. Since we need to distribute the electric buses across the city, we have a need to electrify all three of our remaining facilities at the same time. And honestly, that does have some challenges associated with it. But we are looking at new methodologies, especially as energy as a service by different companies. So we feel pretty confident we should be able to meet certain the timelines we currently have.
Thank you so much for that response. Really appreciate the work that's been done.
Mr. Kratz?
You know where we're going. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And of course, I've also been advocating for this coming online for a long time, and I'm excited to see that it's here. Also, our Climate Emergency Mobilization Office is going to come online soon, so I'd encourage the two entities to try and work together and see if they can do that to some advantage. I was going to ask a question that's largely been answered, about what we need to do in terms of upgrading our grid to service these EV fleets. What's the sort of timeline to be able to do that, to reach the point where the grid itself can fully handle the demands of the buses that we're looking to continue to purchase?
The final answer in regards to the grid capabilities are with LADWP. But what we've done is we've started already a working relationship with them. They're aware of the different needs that each facility has. And based on the details, we're trying to get a head start on being able to provide the power to each of our facilities. But that needs to go through a process at LADWP.
So you're not aware of a timeline currently that they have to fulfill all the infrastructure needs?
No, not at this time.
Okay. And one other question, do we have any ability to impact the other bus fleets that cross into the city, crisscross the city, Santa Monica bus, any number of other ones, to encourage them to take this same step? And is there any way that we might provide a little bit of the charging infrastructure to them as well, or some sort of reciprocal arrangement to easier for them to begin that as well?
Most of the agencies, our sister agencies, are on the same path. We do have a unique project where we're leasing some property under the Caltrans Bridge at Maple and 16th and Grand and 17th, where we jointly with Foothill Transit and AVTA went after a grant to create the charging infrastructure necessary for us to do, for example, midday charging in order for the long-haul vehicles that AVTA has, for example, and or that Foothill has, to be able to charge at midday during midday in order to be able to run their PM services. At the same time, that facility will serve to assist LADOT in charging its fleet, because hopefully the timeline associated with that facility would be quicker than our Washington facility that we also are in the process of electrifying. So we are working with our sister agencies constantly to move forward the electrification process.
Great, thank you.
Great, thank you. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
A second?
Second.
All right, Mr. Clerk, please call the roll.
Mr. Bonin.
Aye.
Mr. Buscaino.
Aye.
Mr. Koretz.
Aye.
The action is approved.
Great. Thank you very much. That brings us to our final item, S2, special agenda item number 2.
Item number 2 on the special agenda is an LADOT report relative to the status and future recommendations for the Slow Streets LA program.
Okay, thank you.
Good afternoon again, council members. Again, my name is Dan Mitchell, Assistant General Manager for LADOT, and I'm here to provide you with an overview, update, and next steps for the Slow Streets LA program. So the program began on May 15th of this year when Mayor Garcetti launched the Slow Streets LA program to temporarily calm traffic on residential streets to create space for neighbors to remain physically active while socially distant. This is in response to the closure of our parks, gyms, trails, and other popular venues. So LADOT initiated this program as an application-based program where eligible organizations could nominate a small network of 1 to 3 miles of their neighborhood streets to help reduce and slow traffic. This program is a partnership with the Bureau of Street Services, Streets LA. They have supplied and delivered the materials to the neighborhood locations, and then LADOT has implemented the temporary signage at these intersections, advising drivers to slow down for people using the street to exercise. Demand for the program has been high, and so far we've received over 427 applications and implemented approximately 50 miles of slow streets in 30 neighborhoods. An important component of this program has been a focus on equity, and to speak briefly about that, I'd like to introduce my fellow Assistant General Manager, Connie Llanos, who is also our department's Chief Equity Officer.
Good afternoon, Connie Llanos, LADOT Assistant General Manager. So from the beginning, equity was an incredibly important component for us to the deployment of slow streets. We did want to adopt some lessons learned from communities nationwide and really wanted to ensure that we were doing our implementation really from a community-based perspective, allowing folks to apply and let us know if they wanted this amenity in their community. We also know and understand that there's some capacity building work that needs to happen to ensure that our most impacted communities, which we measure by some common denominators like housing density, lack of open space, higher concentrations of poverty rates, as well as communities of color. We knew that we needed to build some capacity, so we contracted with Concui Design Initiative to help us ensure that we were providing the technical resources needed to folks in these communities. The organizations, we reached out to almost 40 organizations in the 13 neighborhoods that we designated as the highest need communities for the Slow Streets program, and we exceeded our initial goals here, where we wanted to have at least 5 slow streets deployed within the 20 communities that we were deploying slow streets in. I also wanted to clarify from some of the comments that we heard earlier today. Actually, from the moment the program was launched, it was available, the application was available bilingual, English and Spanish, and then because of having our contracted support, we have been able to provide additional language resources to other communities as needed. With that, I think I'll pass it back to Dan. Thank you.
Thank you, Connie. So this program has been implemented as a partnership with these community organizations who have applied, and the responsibility to maintain the signage and the barricades has been a shared responsibility. The materials that we used were readily available, lightweight, and easily implemented, so we could deploy them quickly. But I think, as you heard from many of the comments, they require constant attention, and as the program has continued and the restrictions have remained in place, the need for the program has remained strong. It is time for us to look at more durable materials for this program. So at this time, the department has stopped installing new slow streets until additional funding is available, so that we can turn our focus to the existing 50 miles of slow streets throughout the city. LADOT is going to work with our community partners to select between 3 options for the slow streets in their areas. The first option is to replace these barricades with striping and metal signs that would warn drivers to watch for people walking and biking, and to advise drivers to travel 15 miles an hour or slower. The second option is to replace the plastic barricades with larger and more durable temporary barricades with signs designated the street as closed to traffic and to through traffic. And with that option, the department would follow up and submit a resolution for council approval to formalize the temporary street closures according to California Vehicle Code Section 21101. The third option is to, where it's appropriate, to remove barricades and streets within a given slow streets area. So looking ahead, the department's identified a total of $800,000 in Open Streets program funding to install more durable materials for the Slow Streets program. So we're proposing to repurpose the funds from open street events that were canceled or postponed to comply with the public safety guidance related to COVID-19. That funding is enough for the department to upgrade approximately half of all the slow street intersections to striping and metal warning signs, or all of the intersections to larger, more durable barricades for temporary road closures where they're approved. So one or the other, we don't have necessarily enough funding, depending on the choices that are made, to cover all of the choices of our community partners. Should additional funding be identified, then we would ensure that the upgrades I described are funded for all the existing streets, and then dedicate the remaining funds to expanding the Slow Streets program into new neighborhoods. And in that case, we would move forward with both the upgrades and the new streets in parallel. And then the department plans to report back in approximately 90 days on the status of the program and the upgrades I described. And that concludes my report, and I'm welcome to answer any questions.
Thanks. What exactly will the durable signs and striping look like there?
They would be metal warning signs identifying warning for people walking and people cycling, and then add a speed of 15 miles an hour to warn drivers to go that slower speed. And then we'd also use striping on the street that we've tailored through our different programs like Vision Zero to help slow traffic and alert them as they enter these communities.
Will there still be things in the middle of the street, or are you putting everything off to the sides?
Depending on the street width, we may use equipment in the middle of the street, but primarily would be on the sides.
Yeah, my fear is if it's on the sides, nobody's going to even notice it. To me, I think the only messaging really came from the sort of barricades or sawhorses in the middle of the street.
Yeah, it is something that we are going to be experimenting with so that we can find the most appropriate tools to generate the most significant impact, provided we're addressing access to the neighborhood. The narrower entrances sometimes don't provide us to be able to install things in the street without while still preserving access. But we'll be mindful of that.
Moats and drawbridges. One last thing. At least in CD11, and I imagine in other parts of the city, our slow streets are along streets that are planned as part of the mobility plan neighborhood network. And I'm just wondering, is LADOT paying special attention to these streets and considering how temporary streets might evolve into a permanent neighborhood network street?
Yes, we are. So we'll include that review as we work with our community partners for long-term solutions along their neighborhood streets, and we'll consider the installation of sharrows and other markings to implement those.
Great. Questions, colleagues? Joe?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So, Dan,
I'm not picking on you. It's just Joe hits the unmute button faster than you do.
Got it. Go ahead, Paul. You want to go? Go ahead. You okay? Okay.
I'm fine. In fact, I'm still struggling with the unmute button, so go ahead.
Yes, we know. Dan, quick question. Have we received any requests outside the 13 designated areas? Clearly, you've indicated in your report that demand is high for slow streets. But how many have we received? Because I know a few folks in Wilmington and in San Pedro want part of this. Throughout the city, are we getting requests from outside these 13 designated areas?
Yes, we have. And when I checked this morning, we have 47 viable applications that we've been from streets that we have not been able to implement slow streets for yet.
So 47 viable applications outside the 13 identified zones, correct?
That includes all areas of the city. I'm not sure how many of those are in the 13 identified areas that we listed.
Wondering if we have residents who are willing to take on the work and partner with a nonprofit and get it done, will we be we embrace that?
Well, what we're proposing right now is because of the funds that we've identified, we don't believe that those could even address moving the current streets to longer-term materials that we've focused there, unless we have additional funding that would ensure an exit strategy that we could in fact make successful slow streets in the long term.
Okay, I was just trying to get at very similar to what we done with Alfresco. The business pay a fee, fill out the report, or fill out the through the portal, the application, get it approved. But that seems to be a little bit. I just want to be able to give residents an opportunity to be a part of this Slow Streets program, since it's very popular.
Yeah, and I appreciate that, and we definitely want to reach as many streets in the city as we can, but I think the solutions that we've identified require our staffing to install these solutions, and just opening it up to a type do-it-yourself type approach is not one that we're ready to implement at this time.
Thank you for that. Thank you. Paul, thank you very much. Well.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And my understanding is that there are a lot more applications than what you said in the queue. According to my staff, there's something like 400 plus. Is that correct or incorrect?
Councilmember, the 427 number that I identified was for the total applications that we've received thus far. Many of them were not compatible with the criteria that we identified, and many of them have been implemented. And the ones that remain, that are viable, number 47 at this time.
And we've let them all know, I presume, that this is moving somewhat slowly, so they won't be funded in the immediate future?
We've let them know that at this time we have stopped implementing new slow streets because we have exhausted the resources that we've identified.
So the current slow streets that aren't in the areas that you mentioned, the 13 areas, like in my district, the Mid-City West area has some slow streets that aren't on the list. What's the plan for them to make them more permanent, or do we continue to use the somewhat flimsy signage and sawhorses?
No, our plan is to address all of the existing slow streets in both the impacted areas and the other areas of the city.
Okay, so they just weren't on the list, but they will be addressed.
Yes, the report has an Exhibit A, that lists all of the existing neighborhoods and community partners and the mileage in each one.
And the choice that we're looking at is more permanent signage or better equipment to put in the center of the street, and better signage and better adhesive for those? Which are we planning?
That is correct. Both. So that's something that we will be working with the neighborhood sponsors to identify which they feel is the most effective for them. The choice is basically with, longer term metal signs that would be posted just like any other signs that the department erects. And those would be warning signs for people walking and cycling, as well as the advisory speed, the 15 miles an hour and slow message. The alternative is to use temporary durable equipment that would indicate the road is closed to through traffic, but then accompanied by a resolution that we would bring to the City Council to formalize the temporary street closures. but those would be temporary, according to the California Vehicle Code.
And with my observation of certainly this slow street in my neighborhood, since I'm just off Sweetser, so I use that with some frequency, the problems I've observed, one, the signs were affixed with relatively flimsy tape, so on a windy day, basically they all blew off, and you could find them. You noticed there was nothing around. If you looked around the street, 50 or 100 feet away, there would be the sign. If you used a little better tape, they'd be more solidly on there. The other problem I noticed is it seemed like they were written to be unnecessarily complex and small. So a certain number of drivers looked at it and said, why is that up there? Well, it doesn't seem to apply to me, and just kept driving through. So if there's a way to just make it larger and simpler, not making it clear that it's not a through street, except for local traffic, I think that would be helpful. I don't know if there's any way to enforce that, because some drivers just look at it as an easy shortcut because there's no traffic on the street. And I've seen that too, but by and large, I think we've got pretty good compliance. And it works well. And when I walked on the slow streets, even wearing a mask that I think makes me unrecognizable, I still get recognized, and people wave at me and say, hey, this is great, keep these slow streets, they're terrific. So I get a lot of good feedback on it, and happy to see us move forward with this.
Thank you, and we'll include your recommendations in evaluating the signage moving forward.
Great. Do we have a motion to approve? Move it. Second. All right, let's call the roll. Just quick. Mr. White? Mr. White, we can't hear you.
How about now?
Yes.
Very good. Motion to approve the LADOT report. Mr. Bonin?
Aye.
Mr. Buscaino?
Aye.
Mr. Koretz?
Aye.
The report is approved.
Great. Mr. Clerk, non-CLA, that clears your desk, does it not?
Yes, it does.
Yes, it does.
Great. So with that, we are adjourned. Thank you.
Councilman.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you all. Thanks, Mr. Chair. Thanks, man. Goodbye.